I've got a dilemma. Let me tell you about it. We have a dog. His name is Linus. He's a rescue. You've heard me talk about Linus. If you want to see pictures of Linus, he has a whole webpage. Go to SethAndrews.com. There's a tab that says Meet Linus. There's photographs and video of Linus. He has stolen our hearts. He is a loved and cherished member of our family. So I was out on a walk with Linus. I guess it's been a couple of weeks ago. And I got a call from Natalie's cousin. And he said, we're on the hunt for a rescue dog. Got 3 young daughters. I think they're all under the age of 10. And we think it may be time. And we know that you know people at the Humane Society, and they live on the East Coast. And they're like, most of the dogs we're seeing advertised here, they're larger dogs, and we need a smaller dog. We're just not seeing what would be a good fit for our family. Do you know anybody? Can you keep your eyes open for us? And I said, well, of course. I know people at the Humane Society. We teamed up. We did the Henry van together, and we raised money for them, and they become dear friends, and they do amazing work. So I contacted Gina at the Humane Society, and I said, look, Natalie's cousin's on the hunt for a smaller dog, under 10 pounds, something that would be okay, good for children, etc. And before my evening was over, I started to get photographs, including the photograph of a little dog, a Shih Tzu named Gracie. Oh, this dog was really cute. Natalie and I were like, all right, fine, we'll go take a look. We're just looking. We're going to go look. For the cousins, we're going to go look. And so the next day, we drove out to the hub, which is this big center for the Humane Society, where they keep the dogs as they are transitioning through and to other shelters, to their forever homes, etc. And they led us back to the area with the cages, dogs barking everywhere, And they opened the cage, and inside this cage was the most terrified dog. Just terrified. Shaking and growling, and eyes were wide. What has happened to my world kind of thing. And the dog was wearing this god-awful dress, which makes me think that she was an owner surrender. The story was the owner was traveling too much and could no longer care for the dog. The dog is roughly 4 years old, and so the owner surrendered. Well, that to me just sounds traumatic. But, you never know about people. And there are people who surrender dogs with all kinds of excuses. And when I saw this awful-looking dress, I was thinking, old lady, right? This is an old lady. Shaking, wide-eyed, growling, terrified. What has happened to my world, right? And as he began to reach in, she was snapping, biting, defensive. She felt threatened. She felt afraid. And finally, he took a slip leash, and he was able to get it over her neck. And he was able to kind of pull her forward just a little bit. And as he kind of put his hands on her, she relaxed just enough for him to pick her up, and we brought her into the lobby area, and we put her on the ground. And she was totally disoriented. So she let us put our hands on her. She walked around a little bit, introduced her to Linus, who was in the room. And we thought, okay, we'll foster her for a little while. And we'll evaluate and see. And if she's a good fit, I think we should, give her to the cousin. Second chance. It's terrible. If nothing else, fostering is much better. And I hold to this position today. Fostering is so much better than leaving the dog locked in a cage. Give the dog a home, security, safety, attention, affection, good food, time, right? Some people have, I think, worthy concerns that, well, what happens if the dog bonds to you and then you give her away? She has to start over. And I'm like, well, it's an imperfect solution, but it's sure better than leaving them in the chaos of these kennels, And so we brought her home. She was just a mess, growling and every noise. She jumped. You touch her and she would flinch. Was she abused? Was she not used to human touch? Was she simply afraid of the touch of someone who was not her original owner? What was her story? What was her history? I still have no idea. We're just guessing. The first thing we did is to throw away that god-awful dress. No wonder she was traumatized. I trashed it. I should have burned it. Should have burned it. We put her in, we have a little kennel that we made, a piece of furniture someone made for us. We put her in. She sat in there feeling safer, right, in an enclosed, confined space. She wouldn't eat. She ended up under the bed. You try to reach over and touch or get close. She would growl and snarl and bite. At one point, she ended up under this little stool in the bathroom. We had this little sitting stool thing that sits near the sink, and she went under that. And it was my fault. I was moving too fast. I was trying too hard. I was trying to force it. I walked in, and I was trying to get her to come forward. Come on, let me pick you up. I think we were going to try to, we knew to go outside, right? Let's go outside. And I reached down and tried to pick her up, and I got a pretty good bite on the hand, drew blood. And I was still able, despite the bite, she's attached right here. I was able to kind of scoot her around, put my arms around her, and then she melted, right? She only bit for a second. And, she was just not connecting, withdrawn. And, that went on for a couple of days. And on the third day, we started to see a little bit of a spark. A little bit of a tail wag. It is amazing how gratifying a little tail wag is. That mouth open, that doggy smile. You're like, oh, there's somebody in there. Somebody in there. I'm sure the dog was depressed. And probably hugely bonded to someone who has now disappeared from their life forever. And, we're trying to compensate. We're trying to put her on the couch next to us to give her time and to socialize her, to show her that it's safe. You're safe. That's going to happen to you. A chair got tipped over and she jumped in the air and ran under the bed. These noises. She was not herself. Then we had to take her in to get her spayed almost immediately because we thought, well, she's going to be on a plane in freaking 10 days. So we have to do the procedure now, not optimal. So that was traumatizing. That's another 2 days of her coming off the drugs and being withdrawn. I have a point to this story, okay? Bear with me. So on the second day, we're on the bed, we're sitting up. Linus is in my lap. Gracie is sitting near the end of the bed. And Natalie says, come here. Does that thing with the hand, pats, come here, come to this place, come here. Gracie crawled forward. Just crawled toward Natalie. And went up and put her paws on Natalie's neck and stretched out, and Natalie scratching the back. And the dog melts, totally surrenders. And they just had a moment. Totally safe. Totally good. Everybody on their own terms. And that was the beginning, really. And then the tail began to wag even more, and then we started to develop routines. She'd hear the food bowl, and she knew that it was time for breakfast or dinner, and she'd run around and do her thing, and then we would go outside immediately after, and then she would sit on the couch. She's sitting over here on the couch in my office. Right? That's her spot. I made her a little bed. She's got a safe place. She is being... You want to see a photograph? This is me and Gracie here. I took that yesterday. She's precious. She's just precious. So, in 5 days, there's somebody coming here from Washington, D.C. to take her. And we are starting to, we're coming up with scenarios to prevent it. Let's call them. Let's lie. Let's say that Gracie hates children. She has a history of biting children. You don't want her in your home. She'll harm your kids. No, you should leave her here with us. Leave her. She's not house trained. She pees craps everywhere. It's a mess. She chewed up the couch. She chews furniture. She's terrible, terrible dog. You don't want this dog. No. Leave her with us. How are we going to get to the point where we can give her to someone else? It's almost like that story of, well, I didn't mean to fall in love. I didn't mean to fall in love when I first saw her, but my heart went pitter-pat. It's a little bit like that. 5 days. They're going to stay with us for 3 days to give them a chance to bond. They're here for other things, family stuff. And then Gracie is going to say goodbye, and they're going to take her, and they're going to go to the airport, and they're going to put her in the little pet carrier under the seat, which I'm sure is going to scare the crap out of her. And then they're going to take her to another house in Washington, D.C., and they're going to introduce her to a whole different scenario. And I'm thinking, all right, perspective. I mean, these are just a few short days in what's going to be, hopefully, another, 12, 13-year life. And they are beautiful people. They will provide a beautiful family. They will be beautiful for her. And after she gets over the trauma of the transition, she is going to be just fine. How does this not comfort me? How do you give that up? I mean, how do you give that up? It's amazing to see the transformation. Not to be too, romantic and sentimental, but I have my moments. To see the animal go from terror and distrust and paranoia and just snapping and biting and carrying on to being able to realize it's okay. You're safe people. You're not going to hurt me. You're not going to mistreat me. I don't have reason to fear you. I can be with you and it's okay. And so now, when I walk over to her, it used to be if you were looming, you're tall and she's way down here, she obviously immediately would feel threatened and she would curl up or she would run away. But now I walk up to her and I lean down and she just looks up. Those little eyes. And I put my arms underneath her, my hands, to make sure she's okay, because she's still, recovering. She's a week out of being spayed. And she just goes limp. She melts into my hands. And she's a hugger. So you put her here and she just puts her paws up around your neck. And how do I give that up? How does someone give that up? But the larger, I think, conversation that I'm having in my own skull is this desperate need for us to remember that there is goodness in the world and that we need to be the agents of goodness. This broadcast is going out on the anniversary of 9/11. I'm not going to get political about 9/11. I want to talk more about humanity. It was the agency of hate, of being indoctrinated to distrust and to loathe and to hate and to demonize and vilify, that drove so much of what happened on that day. And granted, there were tons of precursors. There were, we can get into, what we did to other nations, and we can get into the role of religion and politics, which so often are married together. And, the fact that the vast majority of people who practice the Muslim religion are not the people who carried out this murderous act on 9/11, but are people who practice a peaceful faith and want a peaceful world. I mean, it's like the cultural Christians who ignore or don't even realize that those awful verses and edicts in their unfaith are in the Bible. They're not part of the Christianity that is stoning disobedient children to death. Making adulterous women miscarry their children as they stand in front of a male tribunal. Those stories in the Old Testament. They're not about harming other people. They reject the dehumanization of other people, and they have embraced this sort of hugely cherry-picked, happy-clappy flavor of Christianity where you find all the best verses, the best teachings, and you can find good in the Bible. The Bible, I can make the Bible be whatever you want it to be. You want the Bible to be a love book? I can figure that out. Yeah, let's go find some verses. Yeah, there's plenty of love in there. Want the Bible to be a charity book and an acceptance book? Yeah, I can find some verses that support that. Yeah. Want the Bible to be about tribalism, bigotry, hate? Yeah, I can find those verses for you. It's this hugely schizophrenic book. But you can make it whatever you want. I mean, it's probably one of the reasons that this particular religion remains the most popular religion in the world right now, is because, people have made it culturally relevant without even knowing what's in the Bible. I wrote a whole chapter about Christian ignorance of the tenets of their own faith. It's really pretty impressive. I'm digressing here, but I'm thinking about doing a version of the Koran experiment that those guys in the Netherlands did. I'm thinking about setting something up, like at a public gathering, I'm going to put a tent up or something with a sign. I'm going to call it the Koran Challenge. I'm going to take a Christian Bible. I'm going to slip a Quranic cover over it. I'm going to then read specific edicts, verses, chapters, stories, commands out of the book to people who I run across. And in this state, it's going to be Christian. It's assumed they're Christian in Oklahoma. And I'm going to say, what do you think? Let's do the bitter water story. Except we change some of the details, in the Quran, according to the command of Allah, as issued by Muhammad, they brought women, and you know how Islam feels about women. They brought women suspected of adultery in front of an Islamic tribunal. And they put them on trial. And they took dirt from the floor and they mixed it up with this other stuff and made what they called the bitter water. And they forced the woman to drink it. And if she miscarried the child, it was proof that she had been an adulteress. I mean, isn't that crazy? What's your opinion of that Quranic verse? Oh, it's terrible. What a barbaric religion. You can tell. Back then, the primitives, they were so barbaric. It's just crazy. The Quran says that if A couple of men are fighting, and one of their wives intervenes and tries to rescue their husband by grabbing the opponent by his genitals. That they're supposed to take the woman and grab a sword and cut her freaking hand off. In fact, the Koran says, show her no mercy. What do you think of that? Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. What a barbaric religion. You know, the Koran says women aren't even allowed to teach in the mosques. Yeah, I know. That's just crazy. Etc., etc. And then you slip the cover off and say, actually, how would you feel about... Oh, actually, I think in the Koran experiment in the Netherlands, they then, before they revealed the Bible, they said, now, how do you feel about the Christian Bible? Just to get their opinions. Well, I think the Bible is a good book. The Bible's a love book, you know. The Bible is, you know, it's about acceptance and charity. Jesus had wonderful teachings in the Bible. I mean, nothing like the Koran, right? You get them on the record, and then you take the cover off. By the way, Linus is hi. You take the cover off, and then you watch them lose their minds. What? No. And then you, of course, will have to go and show them the specific chapters and verses because they're not going to believe you. They're not going to take your word for it, which I think is good. Yeah, actually, if you look over here, here it is. Okay. Oh, look, beat your slave. Okay. Look, human sacrifice on the altar with fire. People sacrificing their children. Yeah, you got to show them. And then I would not, after that, continue the discussion at all. I mean, they're probably going to continue protestations, but I think you need to let them stew on what just happened to them from a position of safety where they don't feel attacked. And then perhaps in their own skull, they have this moment of epiphany where they think, how much do I really know about the Bible? I didn't know that was in there. The Bible can be whatever you want it to be. Anyway, I went off on a huge digression there, but it's something I've been thinking about. But back to goodness, you know, basic goodness. Does it matter? Will the world ever change? I have struggled a little bit, and I'm forcing myself out of it. I've struggled with an it really doesn't make any difference kind of attitude, right? I've been going through that sort of, you know, I've been doing this for 11 years and I know better logically, but in my gut and in my heart, seeing the moment by moment awfulness all around me, I think, you know, the thing is really changing. Their mind's really changing. These people are impervious and the awfulness continues. You know, I just can't. And you struggle with, should I just throw up my hands and just fuck it? You know, I mean, I give up. I surrender. But I have come to the conclusion that it does matter. It continues to matter. And I think being good and promoting the good and the right and the just and the logical, the reasonable, the humanistic, as much as it is about others, I think it is also about ourselves. What kind of a human being do I want to be? When I'm 80, whatever, and let's say I know that, you know, I'm in my last days. When I look back on the track record of my life, do I want to have spent decades in cynicism and surrender to the awful? Do I want to give the terrible people and ideas? Do they get carte blanche to just go and do whatever? And I never once raised a finger? What does it say about me? Do I want to be the kind of person that says, no, this is wrong, and I want to fight for what is right and what is good, and I want to spread love and kindness and whatnot? And if I draw all this back to 9/11, I think, and I know this is a utopian idea, but I think, imagine if the people, the agents of hate, had committed themselves with that kind of verve toward building instead of burning, instead of giving instead of taking, of loving instead of hating, would our world look so much different? I don't think that's ever going to happen. I mean, Islam hopefully one day will have its enlightenment, radical Islam, like Christianity did, 1,000 years ago, where it had to walk away. I mean, if you tried to practice the Christianity of today in the 11th century, they'd burn you at the stake. You'd be on the rack, right? There's no way. They would call you a heretic. Well, I don't know if Moses actually existed. Burn the witch. Jesus had some good teachings, but I don't hold to all. Burn the witch. I'm not sure the book of Genesis is literal. It might be metaphor. Burn the witch or the heretic. Islam, radical Islam, fundamentalist Islam is not there yet. And, I think this is a whole other show, a whole other discussion. But if we talk about committing ourselves with the whole of our being, to goodness, to stop othering people, to stop embracing and enabling and promoting the worst, it says as much about us, and I think it's beneficial to us. I think it feeds something in us. Like we cheat ourselves if we surrender. We diminish the quality of every day of our own lives if we surrender. We miss out on so much good stuff if we surrender. So even though, as long as tribalistic divisions, they'll always be around. As long as there is religion, as long as there are political agendas, as long as there is one tribe that wishes to dominate another, as long as there is ignorance and phobia, as long as it's profitable to other people, to demonize people, it's always going to be there. In so many cases, it is a natural human tendency. But I really think that our committing ourselves to goodness remains important. It does matter. Minds can be changed. And at the end of the day, we want to be the kind of people who didn't surrender ourselves and let all of the awful stuff win the day, dominate the conversation, suffocate the discourse, define the generation. So for every evil deed or person, there are people like us who say, no, we are not that. We don't represent that. That's not who I am. It's not us. It's not the human condition. It's not the nation. It's not the world that I seek to promote and build. I oppose this for better ideas and ideals. And I really think we have to keep kicking. There's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of paranoia out there. There are a lot of people who are desperate for a place of goodness and safety and nourishment and charity and love. And man, if we're there for them at the right time, then they get to be rescued. And in many ways, it sort of rescues a part of ourselves from cynicism. Becomes this amazing moment of connection, this human connection, where people who may not even know each other alter the course of each other's lives. I just had this on my mind. Imagine if the people who committed to burning the buildings down had committed to crossing those tribal lines. Instead of, hating the infidel, they were respectful of someone else's autonomy and the people here who had vilified all Muslims. Remember, after 9/11, I mean, there was a lot of anti-Muslim bigotry. Imagine if we had taken the time to see the humanity within this huge culture. I mean, the second most popular religion on planet Earth. Like 1.5 billion human beings. Who are they? What are their lives like? What are their loves like? What do they want? How much do they know? How much do they not know? What do we have in common? Imagine if we'd taken all of the time and the energy that we spend spitting on each other, baiting each other, dividing against each other, throwing the stones, escalating. Imagine if all the energy that drove the hate could be redirected. Yeah, it's a pipe dream. Yeah, it's a pipe dream. And we'll always be swimming against that tide, probably, because the agents of chaos can do so much damage. You can take 1,000 good people, or at least people who are not bad, and you can take one agent of chaos, and they can do a lot of damage. It only takes one bomber, one mass shooter, one vandal, one abuser. Do we say, you know what, it doesn't matter, and we just stop? Or do we continue to say, as a matter of principle, no, this is not me. I will not be that. I won't surrender. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep kicking, and whatever happens, happens. But at the end of my life, I will have the assurance of knowledge that I didn't opt out when it mattered. Man, I just went off. This is a total stream of consciousness conversation. I mean, just a total stream of consciousness conversation. I started with the dog, and I end up with a commentary on human goodness. But I mean, they probably all relate to each other. Dealing with even the Humane Society, you see people who are abusers. You see these dogs come out, and dogs have been used to fight and tear each other up so someone else can bet on the fights and make a buck, or maybe for their own sadistic amusement, or who knows. I'll spare you. I don't know, to work for a rescue organization like that, but even translating that into the human experience. There are people in this world. I mean, how do they sleep at night? The abusers, the people who do nothing but take and destroy and knock down and burn and damage. How do they sleep at night? And the terrifying part is many of them sleep quite well, thank you. They are untroubled by the inhumanity within them. What do the rest of us do? Do we throw up our hands and say, not going to make any difference anyway, I quit? Or do you say, well, whether this guy changes his mind, or whether that person alters their behavior or not, or whether this situation specifically over here changes or not, my journey about me is going to be one that represents goodness. It's one of the reasons that here on this show, and I know it's frustrating for a lot of people, I speak to my value system as a host. And this gets us into politics a little bit, but representing equality for people. Right? You're not second class. We're equal. You don't have this right, but I do. Well, let's fix that. You deserve to have this right that I already have. You've been othered by someone else, or they're blaming you for the decline of civilization, or they're calling you shameful or broken, or you're going to hell, and blah, blah, blah. You have to live like I do and be like me and validate me. And even then, you're probably still a second-class citizen. We see that. And we say, hey, you know what? No. You're valid. I see someone else harming another human being, and we step in and say, no, you don't get to do that. That's just humanism. It says something about them, and it says something about us. Have I totally wasted your time here? I cannot in any way be objective about what I'm saying. I'm I'm way too close to it, But that's just what's on my mind. And so I'm doing this unscheduled broadcast. Unprepared, unscripted, unscheduled. It's just talking. Maybe you've got something you'd like to talk about. 712. Hi, who's this?
Oh, holy shit. Hey, let me take you off Bluetooth real quick.
We weren't ready. Sorry, didn't mean to ambush you. I'm sure you were probably had me on speaker as I was continuing. So.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah. What's on your mind?
Awesome. Yeah, I had to get the Bluetooth off, man. No, I just wanted to call about the dog. Me and my wife, we've rescued a few dogs in the past, and we had one that really kind of struck my heart with the one you've got now. We got an Australian Shepherd Reese that had been violently kicked out of a truck on the side of the actual highway, and so we found the Facebook post. They said, "Look, he's very aggressive. We can't, we can't do this. We don't want to, but we're gonna have to send him to the pound." So we ran over there. We picked him up. We brought him home. We actually had to seclude him. My wife is. I mean, I love animals, but my wife is kind of insane about it. We had about 5 dogs at one point, and so we had to actually seclude him for a couple weeks. We also had an AM staff, and they tried to get into it as soon as he walked into the house. But anytime, like the one you've got, anytime you were in a place to be looming kind of over them, he would just turn over on his back and start peeing on himself. He wouldn't walk through a doorway that had a door frame on it. If it was just cut out in the wall, he'd walk through. But anything that he perceived as having a door, he just would not go through it. And I do want to tell you, people like you do make a difference in these dogs' lives. We had him just over 8 months before we finally got him to. We got him calmed down enough that an Australian Shepherd rescue could take him, and he was just the most loving dog by the time he left. He still had some issues, if he saw feet walking under a table and couldn't see anything else, he would kind of freak out a little bit, stuff like that. But it really does make a difference in their lives.
Okay, so we're talking just you and me over coffee, and you know that Natalie and I have fallen in love with Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
Would you give her up? I'm not going to hold you to this. I'm not going to hold you to this.
Okay. It would depend on the situation. I don't know what your personal life is. If it was my life 3 years ago, no, I would have kept her. I would have never let anybody call in the first place. Now we're in a little bit different place, where we could keep a dog for, a few weeks, a few months, but, in my personal situation right now, we couldn't, but if you love the dog, and you want to keep her and your lifestyle fits and she fits in your home, I would say the most compassionate thing to do is let the people coming from Washington know as soon as possible to stay home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably a conversation. Like, they have not yet bonded. They've only seen photographs. So the emotional consequences to them are much less. But at the same time, it's sort of a bait and switch. Like, oh yeah, we'll find you a dog. And then we say, no, not so much.
Okay.
But we're gonna work through that. But I so appreciate the kind words, and there's nothing like rescuing, is there? There's nothing like going in and making that difference, no matter who it is.
When we got the Australian Shepherd, we knew that it was temporary, and let me tell you, I'm not like an asshole, but I'm usually a hard ass motherfucker. I haven't cried in like 20 years now, and I bawled like a baby giving him up. It was,
Yeah, I get choked up. It's
definitely troubling. There is some real grieving that goes on.
Yeah. Well, you're greatly appreciated. I appreciate your call. Thanks a bunch, man.
All right. Thanks for taking it. You have a wonderful day.
You betcha. See you later.
Yeah, bye.
She's listening from the couch. She knows we're talking about her. 615. Hi, who's this?
Oh, Gina Francis?
Hi, Gina. What's on your mind today?
Oh, my God. I cannot believe I am on the show with you. Listen, there was a news feed I saw, an affiliate of CBS, that showed a man who rescued a feral dog, and the dog stopped. I mean, it was so dangerous, but the guy, had him for a month, and the dog stopped in front of a little hummingbird that looked like it was dead, and he would not budge from that spot till the man took the hummingbird in. A year later, he still has that bird. It is the best news story you've ever seen, and I just wanted to let you know about it in case it's a feel-good story, and I just wanted to let you know that was out there.
You know what? You remind me of something, and I didn't know if the listeners would go for this, but I'm thinking of doing a podcast just on feel-good stories, because the internet's toxic, life is crazy, and I think people are so weary. Do you feel that weariness in your heart?
Oh, I don't even watch the news. The only reason why I got this little tidbit for myself is my friend sent it to me. And so, and I trust her judgment on things. And it was just the most amazing thing. I sent it on to all of the people I know. I just loved it so much.
Can somebody if you can find that story, would you email it to me, Seth at thethinkingatheist.com? And if someone in the chat room finds it, post it in the comments. Because I've got to.
Yeah, I can get it directly to you. So it's Seth at
thethinkingatheist.com.
Okay. All right. We'll do it.
Send me the goodness.
I'm on my way to work. Yes, I will. And everybody needs a good story like that.
All righty. Well, thanks a bunch. Drive safe, okay?
Hey, I just want you to know that I appreciate you so much. You have led me into a better frame of mind as far as my atheist. I was raised a Mormon, and I got out, and I just love you. So I just wanted you to know that. Thanks for letting me come on the air.
I'm hugging you from all the way over here in Oklahoma. Thank you so much.
Oh, great.
Right,
I'll hug you back from Tennessee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
How to be an atheist in Tennessee. And Oklahoma's, it's just, people ask me why I continue to live here. Because it's so religious. And the answer is, forgive me if you've heard this, but the answer has several layers to it. One is that the cost of living is so much better here. Like, if I was to buy a house that looked like this house, and I go buy it in San Diego, there's no way I can afford a house in San Diego, 2-story house. The cost of everything when you go to really pretty places just gets insane. Like, how do you afford to live there? And so in Oklahoma, property values are way down. And you can live here pretty inexpensively. Also, the city itself is well laid out. It's not too big. It's not too small. Granted, everything, of value shuts down at 8 o'clock. But that's fine. I'm a morning guy. I'm not a night owl, and I'm not a partier and all those things. And finally, there is a certain pleasure I get out of hosting a globally known atheist broadcast and platform out of Strawberry Red, Oklahoma, in the middle of all the churches and the crosses and the pulpit preachers and everybody. You can see them in their cars. Even during COVID, you can see them packing their cars and they're going off to Sunday church, Being surrounded by religiosity, there is something about being the atheist activist in the middle of all that I find gratifying. Is that weird? I'm not sticking it in their face. I'm not walking around with, insults to Jesus on T-shirts, and I don't walk into a room and lead with my atheist activism. But there's just nothing like being the skeptic in the room. Occasionally, it makes you crazy. Occasionally, you want to go find a wall and put your head through it. But there's also something very, very satisfying about it. Tennessee, got to be the same way. Tennessee. It's got to be Jesus country. 832. Hi, who's this?
Hi, Seth. This is Paul in Houston. How are you doing?
Houston, Texas. You know, if there is a hell, it's Houston in the month of August. I used to go down there and do video shoots. Holy God. Look, I would get off the, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. I was a videographer for a lot of years, and I remember we'd be shooting indoors, and we'd go outside, and all the camera lenses would immediately fog up because it was a freaking sauna outside. And we were already cranky because we spent all that time paying for the Sam Houston tollway, et cetera. So anyway, I don't know if any of that relates to you or not, but
well, it's a safety hazard to wear glasses in Houston because you step out of the air conditioning and all of a sudden you can't see where you're going for a good minute. So,
well, I'm glad there's a skeptic in Houston, though. Another Texas atheist. That's cool. Yeah. What's on your mind?
Well, actually, and I've got roots in Oklahoma too. My grandmother's from Frederick.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, I never spent any time there. I mean, I visited, but I understand. So I'm an atheist. I've basically been an atheist my whole life, but I was raised in a Methodist church, which is about as close to atheism as you can get, I guess, for Christianity.
Yeah.
And learned about a year ago that my parents are also atheists and always have been. So they've raised us just to be around the church to, for educational purposes and for community. And so my brother and sister and I, none of us are religious, so to speak. And you were talking about, it's 9/11, goodness of people, toxicity online, and it's infuriating. And it's very personal for me because my brother, he's estranged from our family now for, I haven't talked to him in about 7 or 8 years.
I lost you, my friend. Hopefully that's a drop in the call, but he will return. Make a note of the area code in case he calls back. Yeah, I did lose him. Let's put a bookmark there and come back to him. I'll take a look on the switchboard. 773. Hi, who is this?
This is Al.
Al, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Well, two things. It's interesting how often you'll hear folks talk about how, well, they hate our freedom when they talk about folks overseas that want to do harm, particularly Islamic terrorism. There's something that people don't often talk about. I guess it's because maybe it's a little bit, they feel it's a bit weak to admit because it makes them sound a little bit less like, heroes and all that. But there's a section of the Koran, not the Quran, but the one of the 6 major hadith books. They're sort of like the epistles of Islam, kind of. They basically talk about what Muhammad said, and there's a part that mentions that if you martyr yourself in the name of in the name of Allah and protecting infidels and all that stuff, you not only go to heaven, but what they don't mention is you get to intercede for 70 people who are still on earth and have them to go to heaven. So you imagine that and this goes back to a very warped version of the goodness kind of thing. You imagine a poor area and maybe your cousin ate bacon and snuck it once, or maybe, somebody was looking at something weird online and is sneaking around. Maybe the people that you care about aren't the best tip-top 100% Muslims in the world, and you're not doing too well. You're poor, and you're just looking for answers. You're looking for something to do to make you feel like you're like a real Muslim, like you're really doing the thing. And then you just start scrambling for any kind of enemy. And right there on TV, you're seeing enemy after enemy after enemy. Just, it's like, oh my gosh, maybe I should, no, maybe I shouldn't do that. Well, maybe I should, no, maybe I should. And they just go back and forth. This doesn't speak to every single one, but there are several who you'll find out were these, middle class students who were just fell off the wagon, or these poor people who just needed a way out. And then all of a sudden they became these radicals. And a lot of times it's basically, in a weird way, in their head, they think that they're doing the right thing, not just for themselves, but for the people that they, like family members, friends. They think that they're going to lift an entire village out of whatever issue because they bombed a church or something crazy, and like the weird perspective of it is, it's something that if you find them early enough, particularly the young men, if you find them in their teens early enough, before they get beset by the ways of the world, you can kind of turn them around and help them to realize that desperation doesn't need to be their end game. And that's a side of things I never realized until I really studied it put out.
That's interesting stuff. They find people at vulnerable points in their lives. Imagine selling them the kind of hero. It is kind of a hero narrative. What if my death results in the salvation of 70 people who may not attain paradise? You have then a sense of divine destiny. So not only are you ending your miserable existence here, but you get to intervene on the behalf of dozens of other people. And that gives you even more motivation to take these radical steps. That's, I think, a salient point, man. I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, it makes little things like that, little passages make it where it's like, that's why this is a little different than Judaism, Christianity. It's like, okay, the Renaissance may take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
Thanks so much for the call.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for everything.
See you later. It's interesting how nobody's the villain in their own story. That famous quote. Nobody's the villain in their own story, I don't think. So when you're doing terrible things for what you believe are righteous reasons, well, welcome to the history of theistic religions. Now, Islam today, radical Islam today, is the Christianity of the 11th century. You know what I'm saying? You want to talk about religious terrorism? Just look at the history of Christianity. I think today, radical Islam is the most dangerous religion on the planet. I also think that despite the fact that the vast majority of Muslims are peace-loving, good people, that the radicalism of the extreme is presenting the kind of dangers with today's technology, with the connectedness of the world, that we did not see 1,000 years ago with Christianity. The stakes are much, much higher because of the technology and the connectedness of our world. So much more damage can be done by much fewer people in a much shorter amount of time. We don't have 1,000 years for Islam to find its enlightenment. And it's because we care about Muslims, we care about human beings, that we criticize Islam. It's because I care about Christians that I criticize Christianity. You and I, we care about people who have been indoctrinated with terrible ideas, not because we hate those people, but because we care about them. And we want to see them disabused of those bad ideas to join us over here in a much better place, a more humanistic place, a more reasonable, rational place. That's hard for some people to make that distinction. It's easy, again, to other someone else, and you just think, well, they're all this. And then you demonize them, vilify them. You got to remember, these people are victims too. Their lives are wasted too. The radicals, the extremists. Yes, we have to use whatever force necessary to stop their murderous acts. But, these people they are the ultimate victims of terrible ideas. Likely brainwashed by family and mosque and church and culture and whatever. Imagine if those people could be reached and they channeled all of that verve into something positive. To create instead of destroy. Imagine what they might accomplish. A utopian dream? I don't know. I see examples of people who held radical beliefs, who came out and they built a better world. A great example, and I've mentioned this in the past, are the white supremacists. They're part of Klan groups. Spent their whole lives othering non-whites. They realized that they were just wrong, toxic, awful. This is not who I want to be. This is not how I want to live. They crawled out of that bubble and they spend the rest of their lives fixing, changing, altering the narrative, countering hate with love, being the better person, helping to undo the damage. It's possible. 561. Hi, who's this? Hello, 561.
Hey, Seth, sorry about that.
No worries. Who's this?
This is Matt from Asheville.
What's going on, my friend?
Nothing much, brother. How's it going? I just wanted to pass along some good news. Me and my wife moved up here from Florida, South Florida, pretty liberal place, and now we're up in the mountains of Asheville, which, as you might know, is a little blue dot surrounded by all red. And I work in a nursing home. And I'm actually having a conversation with Aaron Raw about this next week, about kind of the anti-science, anti-vaccine that I honestly hear from my other coworkers. But through all this, we haven't had one single COVID case. So it's kind of more actions speak louder for words. Everyone's been taking this pretty responsible. And, the community we have here, these people, we spend, 12 hours a day, 3-4 days a week with them. They're our family, they're our friends. So I'm really proud for my staff for kind of, keeping up with things and staying the course.
Okay, well, so they're anti-vax, but you're relating it to COVID cases. Are you saying that there's an anti-science flavor to many of the people that you work with, and yet they are good people, or what's? Help me understand the point.
What I'm saying is, people are somewhat anti-science because we've got a lot of, red around Asheville and stuff like that, a lot of, conservatives and whatnot. And although, they'll complain about the COVID, it's just a flu, it's just a so-and-so. At the end of the day, they still are showing that they're willing to take the necessary precautions to keep it out of the nursing home. I mean, we've had 4 or 5 massive spikes in cases in other facilities around us. And through all this, we've been free and clear. So we've been quite fortunate through that.
I did a tour stop in Asheville. We did a bookstore. This was years ago. Lovely, lovely place. I mean, just a beautiful town, beautiful area, and it gives me hope for the whole state. So that's awesome stuff. I appreciate your call very much.
Absolutely, brother. You have a great Friday.
See you later. Oh, look, there's 832. Let's see if we can get back to this one. Hey, is it you?
Hey, Seth. Yep, I'm here.
I blame the devil.
It's Paul.
The devil.
I was thinking the phone cut out, and it took me about 30 calls to get back in. So
no worries.
Here I am.
No worries. All right.
They didn't cut out again.
As quickly as we can, take me back to the beginning of your point, and let's just start from square one. What were you bringing to the table today?
You were talking about people being good to each other and embracing goodness and well-being, and that ties into charitable listening, which is something I know you and many other folks who talked about, something I've always cared about even before I knew the terminology. And what I was talking about was my brother, who's separated himself from the family, he and his wife and his kids, and have moved out of state. He is huge believer in conspiracy theories, to the point that he has ostracized himself from pretty much everyone he's ever known, and maybe built a new community wherever he is. And the frustration is that he's in the process of doing that, sort of built a conspiracy theory about us, about his two siblings and his parents, and basically is convinced that we are terrible people, that we are awful, evil people. And the irony is that he's pretty much his whole life been very outspoken against religion. He doesn't like religion. He thinks, people are sheep. He doesn't like big government. I mean, the list of things he voices against, that I would probably agree with to some extent. Maybe not quite as hatefully, but I'm not a huge fan of religion myself, but maybe there's some merits. But anyway, and he himself has sort of formed a little religion about fluoride in the water and chemtrails and pretty much everything except for flat Earth. I think he's still convinced we live on a round ball. But 9/11 was actually the reason this all came to me when you were talking about the Twin Towers was the kickoff. The first time he called me about conspiracies back in 2007, saying, "Hey, did you know that the buildings fell as fast as a free-falling ball?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because I'm an engineer, and he thinks that means I'm qualified to talk about how buildings fall. And it just, for years after that, it just kept spiraling down and down until he just couldn't talk to me anymore. And every conversation was consumed with him yelling at me about how I'm not opening my eyes, and our whole family is just a bunch of sheep and they can't be part of it, and much worse things I won't repeat on the air. But it's been really hard for my parents. They're in their mid-70s now. My brother has nieces and nephews he's never met before, and we were a very close family and very aligned on a lot of our beliefs. We're all atheists, and we are all pretty much Democrats, issue by issue, but none of us are Trump supporters. Meanwhile, I'm surrounded by a lot of Trump supporters through my in-laws who are very religious and very Republican, very conservative. It's very difficult, and so it's more. I'm trying to find the silver lining of all this, and it helped me hone my ability to reach out to people and have charitable conversations. I didn't know how that struck you.
Well, it's like the cult of QAnon, isn't it? And conspiracy thinking has always been around. What makes it harder is that every once in a while throughout our history, there are actual conspiracies. So we know that, conspiracies have happened, but we as pattern seekers and whatnot, we tend to take that and run with the ball. My favorite is when they post that stuff, and at the end, they always say stuff like, "Wake up, people," or "Do your research," or "Get educated." And so, you stop and you're like, okay, well, what was your source on this claim? And just look at the data. Okay, well, where did you cull your data? Well, I mean, I'm just saying all of the information that's out there. Yeah, okay, well, where?
Mm.
It's so maddening. You're probably experiencing that as well.
No, Seth, he would accuse me of me doing things that I know firsthand I didn't do. We starve our children and we lock our children in their rooms, that kind of accusation.
What?
And I always say, what? Based on what information?
Oh, hang on.
Well,
hold on. Hang on. Your parent is saying this?
This is my brother.
Wait.
My brother is saying this.
Okay, that's not any better. Your brother says that you're starving your children and locking them in rooms?
Yes. Yeah, he and his wife threatened to call a CPS on us.
To what end?
He's built a...
what does he think you're doing?
He thinks I don't know. I think I'm a child abuser, I guess. I don't know how... There's no rationale, Seth. You can't have a conversation with an entirely irrational person. So when we have talked about this, which is very rare and it's been a long time, I would counter with questions, skepticism. How do you know these things? What information are you basing this on? And you get down to it, and there's nothing. It's second, third-hand information that's been twisted and malformed into a false reality, and that's where he lives, in an entirely different reality where we're all, it's like the rapture, but without any religion.
Anybody else's alarm bells going off? Like this is not just conspiracy. I mean, this is there. I just get the vibe. There's another layer to this particular onion. But I myself have those who are closed systems. My tactic has been to say, well, here's the evidence refuting what you just claimed. Here's why it makes no sense. And then I don't spend a lot of time arguing because, quite frankly, they're broadcasting a signal. They're not listening. I do think it's important to correct them for the record. Now, if someone is coming after your family, kids' reputation, that's a whole other ball game. I don't know that I'm qualified to advise you, but I would say that's not just somebody holding a terrible belief. That's somebody who is essentially endangering you on a number of levels. And it may be time to take some steps. And there are people out there more qualified to advise on what those steps might be. But, I feel your pain on the conspiracy thing for sure.
No, he's excused himself from all of our lives, so there's really no action for me anymore. He's just he's not the brother I knew. We shared a room for 14 years. We did everything together. We talked all the time. We were a very close family, and he's just not the same person.
Yeah.
Kind of like Darth Vader. My father did die. So he's just not in my life anymore, and we're dealing with the aftermath.
Well, you're still among friends. Even if your brother is not around, you have the support of us in this community, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for calling, man.
You too, Seth. Thank you for everything you do.
Much appreciated. See you later. 9/11, that's tough. There's a lot of atheists convinced that 9/11 was an inside job. Skeptic Magazine did a whole deconstruction of 9/11, revealing how and why the conspiracy theories, Building 7, thermites, flames at this temperatures don't melt steel beams. We hear a lot of that stuff. And of course, the flames don't have to melt steel beams at that temperature. They just have to weaken them. You know what I'm saying? We have documentation. We have the footage. Well, George Bush was behind it. Blood for oil. The people are conspiracy minded in a great many ways. We have a human tendency to, I can't believe you'd ever take the government's word for it. I understand that distrust because we've been lied to so often. But the evidence is the evidence. And putting, wake up, people, get educated, etc., at the end of a post does not make that post true. It's like when someone makes a religious claim and they make it in all caps. All caps is not proof of God. I was on the air at Live 101.5 FM in Tulsa. Somebody popped their head in the door and they said, "Hey, man, did you hear there's a plane at the World Trade Center went into the building?" And I'm thinking it's like a freaking Cessna. Right? Single engine plane. Pilot lost his way or lost his mind. And then, of course, I was educated. Oh, wait, it's a jet? A jet? So turn on the televisions. Was it 15 minutes later when the second plane hit? And, then it just changed. Everything just changed. There was just a buzz. We had 6 radio stations all on the same floor, and they tied all the stations together so that there was one broadcast going out 6 ways. And we were scrambling for information. What's going on? What's happening? What is happening? And it changed us. We sort of woke up from this naive imagining that it could ever happen to us. 9/11 was part of my journey out of religion. One of those major milestones. He had, was it Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson? I mean, they jumped in 5 minutes after the towers fell. And they said, it's because we've accepted gay people. God has removed his hand of protection from us. It's our fault. Co-opting this tremendous tragedy and the murder of thousands to promote their specific agenda, building their soapboxes upon the caskets of the dead, unconscionable. The theocrats have been doing this shit forever. Well, it's because you weren't living our way that all these damaging things happened. You got to live our way, the way we say, or else consequences are forthcoming. Mark my words. Fear pimps. I heard that term years ago. Fear pimping. It's what these people do. They sell fear. Kind of an emotional blackmail. You know what? Because you've allowed this, you're so permissive. It's moral chaos. God said, I'm out. God wanted to intervene and save the lives of the innocent, but he just couldn't because he is just. What the hell? Everybody was invoking God during 9/11. The evangelists, the pulpit preachers, they're all pounding their pulpits saying it's God. God wanted to help. God allowed this. We've turned away from God. Our nation needs God, 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 God. The Islamist terrorists were invoking God when they flew the planes into the towers. God, God, God ordered this. God ordained this. I'm going to meet God. I'm going to be rewarded by God, God, God. And at the end of the day on 9/11, what was going on? Freaking action and reaction. Human action and reaction only. God did not train for that day. God did not pilot the planes. God did not clean up the debris. God did not bury the dead. God was nowhere to be found. It was all human action and reaction. And I remember thinking to myself the whole time, I was in the broadcast studio, and I was, already kind of struggling with my faith a little bit, if I was to be honest with myself. And, I'm considered kind of the Quaker. I'm up at Clear Channel Radio, and I'm surrounded by rock radio. And these guys are totally, this is a different universe from me. I'm this sort of straight-laced fundamentalist Christian guy, squeaky clean. Everybody around me, they're throwing the F-bombs and smoking weed and doing this. I'm just like, I was totally out of my element. But when this went down on 9/11, there was a group of people who came into the studio and said, pray for, they're crying. Pray. Can we pray? We got to pray. I mean, this is what people do when they're afraid, right? They reach out, they call out. I mean, I understand why prayer is attractive to people in moments of crisis. Would you pray for us? Would you pray for us? And I was kind of weirded out, like, what am I going to pray for? And knowing that I was sort of stepping out of an allegiant religion, a allegiant Christianity, I didn't know that I felt qualified. But I mean, what else am I going to do? So we all stood and we were there in this a small studio, and we all stood there and we all held hands. I think there were 4 or 5 of them. Most of them from the business office. They just thought of me. And they came down to the studio. Pray for us. You're the Christian. And I'm sure I spun together an impressive series of words because I am a communicator. Dear Lord, we ask that you protect us in our hour of need. We ask that you help the rescuers find and save those in peril. Lord, we ask that you comfort the grieving and carry us through these dark days into better days ahead for your sake and purpose. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And it made him feel better, like we'd actually accomplished something. And under my skin, it just didn't feel right. And what am I doing? God knew this was coming, right? He knows everything, past, present, future. He exists beyond time. He realized. He saw the terrorist training in the simulators to do this months ago. He saw them slaughtering people in the air so they could take over the plane. He saw them crash into the buildings, exterminate God's children. He saw this happen. Didn't lift a finger, didn't say anything, didn't do anything. I said in my book, Deconverted, God could have stuck all the terrorists in a traffic jam. That morning, he could have stuck them all in traffic and avoided all of 9/11. He could have prevented the whole thing. So he could have smote them with palsy, incapacitated them. 9/11 doesn't happen. Well, God wanted to intervene, but, God is love, but he is also just. Shut the fuck up. I'm so sick and tired of the apologists telling me that God can't because he is just. I hear the same rationalizations when it comes to hell theology. Well, the reason God is going to have to spit roast you for all eternity with unimaginable pain and fire and screaming is because he is love, but he is also just. Shut the fuck up. God. I hear the same bullshit from my father. Son, hell is a real place. Hell's a real place. You don't want to go to hell. You believe hell is fire and it's going to last forever? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a real place. Oh, you don't want to go there. Oh, you're going there. You don't want to go there. All right. Who created hell? Well, the Lord created hell. He didn't want to. But he has to because he's just. All right, hang on. All right, so he created a torture chamber, a big furnace full of fire and pain and awfulness. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Doesn't want to use it. People choose hell. Who would choose hell? It's not even a choice. All right, be allegiant and enslave yourself to this cosmic wizard or he will cook you. That's not a choice. All right, fine. So, Dad, do you love God? Oh, all my heart, I love God. God is love. So when I go to hell and I'm screaming and whatnot, are you still okay with God doing that to me? Well, I mean, it's not God's fault. So, wait a minute, hang on. You love my torturer. You love my torturer? Well, it doesn't really work like that. I mean, God, he created, it's kind of, I wanted to, Will you experience perfect bliss in heaven? Oh, heaven is perfect bliss. Will you know that I'm in hell? Well, if you know I'm burning alive for all eternity, how can you experience perfect bliss? Well, God is love. God is love. God is love. Like a parrot apologist. God is love. God is just. That's exactly what it's like talking to some of these people. God had to do it. Why would an omnipotent God have to do anything? How is a God without constraints constrained by anything? Well, he has to, but, no, he chose, well, it's his will, but it's not his will. And yet then you have to pray so that he changes his will. But actually his will was that you would pray. So he actually had preordained his will to be altered when you prayed the prayer. Oh, shit. Did I tell you I had nothing scripted for today? Did I admit that to you? 208. Thank you so much for waiting. Who's this?
This is Jane.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for being patient with
Hi.
my ramblings today.
You're fine. I totally get it. I think I go off on one of those every day.
What's on your mind? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I was in the veterinary field for 30 years. I worked at animal shelters. I ran an emergency clinic. And I've had so many fosters and foster fails that you have no idea. And I just want to tell you that the veterinary profession needs people like you. We need patient people who are willing to take the time and to give the love to these animals that they need. I mean, my house looks, I don't work in the veterinary field anymore, so I don't have as many outcasts, but at one point my house had 2 3-legged dogs, a 3-legged cat, a blind cat, and a cat who couldn't move his back legs independently of one another, so he had to hop like a bunny.
Oh.
It was the most god-awful ranch you've ever seen.
It's like the island of misfit toys, wasn't it?
It certainly was. And I've had hundreds of fosters. And yes, it's hard to give them up, but you know the people, you know their hearts, and that they're probably as loving as you are, and they're going to care as much for Gracie as you would.
Yeah,
and
you're
that
absolutely
also
right.
leaves room.
Can I ask you a question, since you have that background?
Sure. Yes.
Did you struggle with continuing to believe in human goodness when you saw how many of these animals were treated by your fellow human beings?
Absolutely. I worked in an animal shelter in Florida for 3 years, and I can tell you that I began to hate humankind. Absolutely hate them. I was the person charged with choosing who was going to live and who was going to die.
Ugh.
I personally had to euthanize 150 animals in one day.
Jesus Christ.
Personally, by myself, because of neglect and abuse. We had a person bring in a dog with parvo, and it somehow mutated with the upper respiratory. So not only did the dogs have the gastrointestinal problem, they also ended up with something akin to kennel cough, and we had to euthanize everybody in the shelter and keep the shelter closed for a week and a half and bleach and scrub. And yes, I would have people come into the shelter and tell me what an evil person I was for working there. What an evil, awful person I was. And the last straw for me was some lady came in and she was telling me I was going to hell and, you know, for killing these animals. And I turned around at her and I said, it's because of people like you that I have to do this job. I want these animals to go out with one last pat on the head, with a kiss on the forehead, and knowing that someone in this godforsaken world loved them. It's because of people like you. Please put me out of a job. Spay and neuter your pets. Take care of the ones that you take into your home. If you're not willing to make a lifelong commitment, then don't get that cute little puppy. Don't do it.
I found some encouragement in watching the rescuers come in. You know, it was always like what Mr. Rogers used to say. He used to say, look for the helpers. So if someone abused an animal, I try to take part of my therapy and to fight cynicism is to watch so many people rally together for the purpose of rescue and goodness and kindness and sacrifice. Did that help you at all?
It does. It helps me to know that there are people out there who are selfless, who understand that what kindness can do. You know, now, so I went from one extreme to the other. I was in a shelter for 3 years, and then the last part of my career, I worked for an internal medicine specialist. And I would see people come in and make these sacrifices for their dogs, you know, do chemotherapy for 6 months to get 3 months more with their pet. I mean, so I went from one extreme to the other where people just did not care to, I'll sell my house to save my dog.
Yeah.
You know.
That brings that brings a whole other dynamic in, right? When do I become selfish? Right? Then it becomes the quality of life issue. And Oh, sure, I'm willing to
Right.
spend my life savings, but is that what's good for the dog? Am I just being selfish? We've all
Yeah.
experienced something like that. So,
And how many times I ask people, just you have to look them straight in the face and say, who are you doing this for?
yeah. But
Is
they
this for
are,
you?
they're motivated by love, no matter how it shakes out. It's love, it's connection, it's goodness. This presses
Right.
me forward. I don't think we can give up, right? I don't want to let the awful people win the day. I mean, do you relate to that at all?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why I did what I did. And now, excuse me, now I'm no longer in the animal field, but now I found myself, I'm in the human foster care system, and I've had 2 foster fails with humans. So I'm just a failure all around.
You are my freaking hero. You are what I needed to hear today. Your call is good medicine for me. I am so encouraged by you. You give me hope for the species. You just do. So thank you for that.
Well, you give me hope every time I listen to you, Seth. You are good people.
Well,
And the world needs more of good people. And I think a feel-good podcast would be fantastic.
all right. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to start preparing. If anybody's got a feel-good story they'd like to share for the show, Seth@thethinkingatheist.com is my email. Hey, you keep fostering and failing because you inspire me out there, okay?
I will. And one more plug for the veterinary field, okay? Yeah. This is kind of a downer. 1 in 5 veterinarians or people in that field consider committing suicide every day.
Oh, God. It's got to be a tremendous emotional burden on them.
It is. It's huge. And that's the reason I'm out of it, is because I got compassion fatigue. And it's a real thing. And it causes real depression. And I've had to have a lot of therapy for it. So please, when you are considering taking your animal to that doctor, consider the human emotional toll that it takes on them to treat your pet, because I can guarantee you they are just like me, and that is not just your pet, it's their pet too.
Good stuff. All right. You are being hugged by thousands of people all around the world at this moment who admire you and appreciate everything you do, and you're an inspiration. You're the final call of the show today for that. I just can't do better than you today, okay? So
thank you so much.
All right, you take care of yourself.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, let's end on some goodness. Goodness because it's right. Goodness because it feels good. Goodness because if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? Goodness. Go find the goodness today, my friends. Keep on keeping on. And I'll see you soon.